Welcome to the MarketMYSTR show, the show made exclusively for short-term rental owners and co-hosts that actually works, so you can stop wasting time and money on short-term rental and co-hosting marketing strategies that don't work. Listen in for tips, tricks, and our book solid, move the needle, and core 4 marketing strategies. Here's your host, Scott Hill.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the MarketMYSTR show with a heavy slant on co-hosting. These are always our favorite episodes when we get to bring in a friend and an expert in the industry and have a conversation about what co-hosting looks like in real life, what managing properties, what owning properties, what trying to find guests for properties looks like, and that all applies to MarketMYSTR and everything else. Let's first off, I welcome my co-host back, Jeremy, and then we're going to introduce our exciting guest.
Thanks. Yeah, no, excited for this one. Our guest definitely touches on every single one of those things that you mentioned, and that's our first second timer in 20-ish episodes. Unfortunately, the first episode wasn't the sound quality wasn't good enough to be able to put it out there. So we appreciate.
Well, let's get into it. Joe Rohne. Joe, how do friends pronounce your name?
The official name is Rohne, but everyone's called me Rohne my whole life, and that's why our property management company is Rohne Casa Hospitality.
There you go. So you'll accept either, both are complimentary, right? Okay, sounds good. Well, our guest is Joe Rohne. He is a friend. He is a believer. He's a lot of things to me over the past couple years. He's been in some of the industry groups that I've been a part of. So Joe and I are now beyond just acquaintances for sure. And Joe, what I'd love to do is have you tell us your story. How'd you get into short-term rentals? Some background about you. I know you have a unique, I'm not sure it's totally unique in the industry where you partner up with your wife, but all that stuff would be helpful.
Yeah. We've owned our first business all the way back in 2007 when we bought a preschool, and we've owned that now for 18 years. And at the time I was still doing the corporate hustle, and then jumped into owning a lawn and landscape company back in 2013. And while I had that lawn and landscape company, I knew I wanted to get into real estate. I didn't know exactly what avenue I wanted to get in. And I started reading Audible books, listening to podcasts, doing everything I could. I was probably reading 50 to 60 books a year over about a 4-year period before I got my real estate license in 2020. And then as soon as I got my real estate license, I kind of found the short-term rental niche, and I knew I wanted to jump into it. Unfortunately, at the time, my daughters were select softball and competitive cheerleading. We were traveling all over, and we just didn't have the bandwidth to add it. And the day that my youngest daughter hung up her softball cleats in July of 2022, we wrote an offer a couple days later on our first beach house, and that's how we jumped in. So we bought a beach house down in Panama City Beach, had a friend of mine partner with a second one literally within 2 weeks, someone that I was working with on some long-term rentals. And that's how we kind of got our start and jumped into co-hosting shortly after.
What part of Panama City Beach did you buy your first property in?
So our first property was a little 2-bedroom, 2-bath on the east end, Lower Lagoon area. It's also where my 4-bedroom that I currently own is. And we like that east end of PCB because it's right by all the restaurants. I can be at like 18 different restaurants in 5 minutes. We have a couple little favorite spots that we go to. It's close to the marina to go rent boats. So it's kind of our little niche. We like it down there.
So you kind of touched on some of this, but maybe a little deeper. Why are you doing all this?
So, it's funny. I just had this, I spoke about this on my podcast yesterday. It's all about the why. Like, why do you do this? And for me, it's family. And when I was working corporate retail, I was working probably 60 to 80 hours a week, traveling all over the country. And on April Fool's Day, and there's a reason why I had this on my podcast, on April 1st of 2013, my daughter was 5, and while I was working from home and she was off for the day, I watched her get run over by the mailman. And that was kind of a day that really changed our lives because it really put a lot of stuff in perspective. God definitely was telling us something, that he had a different plan for the direction we were going. I thought that multi-6-figure corporate gig, traveling all over the world was what I was supposed to do, and that's not what God wanted. And we literally quit my job within about a week, started mowing grass, and kind of completely changed our life plan after that.
So Joe, you just made the statement, my daughter got run over by the mailman, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't know you heard this, want to know the outcome of that, but let's just make sure people know the outcome.
Yes, she made a very quick full recovery. She graduates high school next month, and she's accepted in a scholarship to go to ASU this fall. She's amazing. She's my young entrepreneur. She's already started her first LLC and has a business coming out here pretty soon.
Praise God for that. So we're going to briefly, because this is actually officially called the MarketMYSTR show, let's talk a little bit about, Jeremy and I have developed, we haven't heard it anywhere, so we feel like we've got a little bit of a proprietary angle on what we believe the 4 pillars of elite property management are, which are pillar number 1 is the property itself, including the listings. Pillar number 2 is the guest experience. Pillar number 3 would be revenue management, and pillar number 4 would be off-platform marketing. When it comes to marketing your client properties, when it comes to marketing your properties, your co-hosting business, tell me how MarketMySTR is impacting some of that, and even some nuggets about just general marketing advice you'll give for both of those different pieces.
Yeah, so we currently own and co-host. We have a total of 10 properties across Panama City Beach, and each one of those, my wife and I have designed, renovated, and made them super properties. If you go to AirDNA and you look up 4 or 5 bedroom homes, you're going to see our properties show up at the top of the list on top performers because we've done that. And the second part of that is off-platform marketing and what we've been able to do with MarketMySTR. I was one of the early adapters. It's a really robust platform, and we've been really happy with it. I think the biggest thing is every single one of our properties and each one of our owners has their own direct booking website, and our owners love that. They love that I am not directing traffic to Rohne Casa Hospitality for them to book a property, because that's not necessarily booking their property. When we're doing marketing and email marketing and retargeting and things like that, we're specifically targeting their property so they can get bookings to their platform. And our owners really, really like that. They love having their own website.
Yeah, I love
So I'm going to turn this over to Jeremy here in a second, but that brings up like some very core principle business model things that I think that I want to make sure I highlight that you do, which is it's this idea of being a fiduciary, doing what's in the best interest of the client. You know, I know you're maximizing revenue, but it just seems so very obvious to me that those little choices you make are what's in the best interest of the client. So maybe touch on that a second.
It is, because at the end of the day, that's what I'm here to service. It's actually the reason why I don't co-host properties that for my real estate clients. So I'm a realtor in the area. I do not take on properties for people that I've been a real estate agent for. Now, if they're a current co-host property person and they want to buy another property, we'll help them and we'll assist. But if a new client calls me and says, hey, we want you to acquire the property, help us find it, design it, manage it, that's not me, right? I feel like my fiduciary duty is to them to get them the best possible property they can as a realtor, and then let somebody else handle everything else. I don't ever want a client to come back and say, well, you sold us this property for you, not for me. And that's not what I want to do. I want to make sure that I'm hitting the customer's goals or my client's goals more than anything.
So 2 things before I turn over to Jeremy. Number 1, I encourage everybody to follow Joe on social media because he's got a lot of great content. One thing I saw recently, Joe, which I think might be a little unique, but I think you're going to push it and might not be as unique in the future, but the idea of having a hot tub in these beach locations for the shoulder seasons and off seasons, that's number 1. And I assume then that impacts what your personal definition of super property is. So maybe just touch on those 2 things, and then Jeremy will go from there.
Yeah, I think the hot tub is one of those things that it's kind of an unknown in a way. I mean, there's some properties that have hot tubs, and if all you have is a house with a hot tub, that's not going to do it, right? You got an amenity stack to be profitable and be successful in this space. And my properties with heated pools do really, really well in the off season. But when it's 35 degrees in December, January, because it does get that low at night in December and January, who's getting in a pool? They're not. But will they go out and get into a hot tub? And we have 4 of our 10 properties have hot tubs, and they were 4 of our best performing properties this winter. And, everybody's going to make money at the beach or any peak season that you're in, any market that you're in that has a peak summer season. Everyone's going to make money in the summer. What are you doing to make money in the winter is what's going to move the needle from being a good property to a great property. And that shoulder season is so important, and that hot tub can make a huge difference.
Well, one final question, Jeremy.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure I cover this. Joe, talk about how spectacular it is in December on the beach, even though it gets to like 35, the days and how it is an unbelievable vacation, even in the off season.
When we bought our first beach house, we went down and stayed between Christmas and New Year's for the first time ever at the beach. Like, that's not something we ever thought of. And it was 65, 70 during the day. And if you're a lover of spring or fall temperatures, that's what it is. Like, going out on the beach, setting up, beach chairs, having a couple of cocktails, putting they do beach bonfires down in PCB, but sitting down there. And even if you're in a hoodie or a long sleeve, man, it is so relaxing. And it's a little bit different vacation than saying, okay, I'm going to go get in the water, but
Right.
it is still extremely relaxing. And then all those really nice restaurants are still open, and you ain't got to fight the crowds and sit in lines for an hour or wait. You can just walk right into your favorite restaurant, get seated, and it is a great time to be there.
Yeah, no, I love that. My wife and I, since we have a young daughter, do take advantage of going away off peak. And that is something that's amazing, right? Being able to walk into any restaurant or really any place without having to make a reservation is pretty awesome. Two things I wanted to say before we jumped in. Sorry you had to go through that with your daughter, but I am a big fan of kind of who you've become. And I think that was that trigger moment that pushed you to get out of that corporate job. You've touched a lot of people and, for the better in what you're doing now. And you continue to do that. And what you were talking about with MarketMYSTR and having the specific landing page, that is one of the things that I love to bring up when we make our cold calls, right? Because a lot of these potential clients are all with larger traditional property management companies that all send them to, send potential bookers to their website instead of their listing. And I think that is one thing that potential clients pick up on and kind of chat about a little bit. So why don't we jump in? We'll talk a little bit about your business model and scaling and tech and whatnot. You had mentioned that you own and co-host, right? So your business model of choice is co-hosting. What do you see as the advantages for your clients as a co-host versus doing the traditional property management?
I think there's a couple things. Number one, they love to see the money go into their account instead of getting a check at the end of the month, right?
Sure.
So they love seeing every time there's a booking, they get a deposit, their bank account builds up, and then all they got to do at the end of the month is write me a check for my fees, and they like that. They also like the fact that if they were ever to self-manage or fire me, they get to keep their listings, right? They get to keep their reviews, keep their listings, where when you're with a bigger property manager, they own that listing, they own those reviews. So I think those are some of the benefits for some owners, but some owners don't want that. Like, they want to be so hands-off that they don't like it. And I've had some people tell me no, because they wanted to someone that just handles everything, because I send them a report at the end of the month for them to file their own taxes, right? I don't do that for them. Most of them use Avalara. It takes them 5 minutes. It's not a big deal, but that's some of the disadvantages. Is there is a little bit more hands-on in a way for owners. Not a ton, but they might have to put an extra 30 minutes a month into their business that they wouldn't have to do with a full service property manager.
Agreed. Yeah, I think the two pluses are for sure them getting the money directly and owning the listing. Have you ever had anybody push back because they don't want to deal with the bookkeeping aspect?
I haven't. I have each owner that I've managed for, I send them their year-end reports.
Yeah.
Just like, even bookkeeping in a way, because I still, all they really have to do is track my invoice, right? I handle the cleaners, I handle the handyman, the maintenance, any expenses. So their only bookkeeping really is my invoice at the end of the month.
Good point.
And their Airbnb and VRBO revenue reports that show, the revenue reports that I send them at the end of the year.
Right.
So that's really the only bookkeeping that they really need to do, instead of having to track, they're not taking care of all the expenses themselves and having to track all those receipts.
So I think that's a key difference, right? So you really are incurring all those costs and then invoicing it back at the end of the month, versus I know some co-hosts will use like a client credit card when it comes to, buying supplies or paying for miscellaneous things. I think that's a good way to do it. It definitely limits that downside of having to keep all that straight. Cool.
Yeah.
So I know it's different now, but when you first started, you bought your first property. You had mentioned that a friend bought one as well, but how did you go about finding your first couple of clients?
So, I was pretty fortunate. So, my very first client, I was at a dinner. I was on the Baseball and Softball Association Board of Directors. I ran the Select Softball League in St. Louis, and I was at a dinner, and the family that we were celebrating, we invited them to come. They had been a part of our organization for a long time. They had a son with a rare disease that we were raising money for. And I had known them and we had kind of been friends, but didn't really know them. And we ended up sitting next to each other at a dinner table, and we just started talking, and I learned that they had a cabin in Branson and they weren't happy with their manager. And this is just a couple months after we bought our first short-term rental. So, we went from buying our first and closing in September to co-hosting their property in January. So it was a pretty quick turnaround, but that was our getting our foot in the door. The next two clients, we actually did the cold call. We found underperforming properties. So I found a cabin that was a few doors down from his, found out that they were underperforming, gave them a cold call, had that conversation. They signed on about 3 weeks later, and we instantly had 2 Branson cabins. But the third one I like to talk about because I had a client I wanted to get my foot in the door in co-hosting in Panama City Beach. And I had a client, a person that I found, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, golf views, doing like $31,000. Like, this property should be doing $100K. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I cold called him and he answered. And when I called him, when I call people, I don't call and be salesy. My conversation is, hey, I just bought a property in the area. How do you like your property manager? Let's talk about that. And that was kind of how our conversation began. Nice. And I found out that he wasn't happy with his property manager. And one of his biggest complaints wasn't about that he wasn't making money. That was not even his complaint. His complaint was that if he had a problem, because he visited the property often, it would take him 3 weeks to get an email back. And so he called me back on a Saturday, and he said, I'd like to meet you at the property on Monday. Now, he does not know I live in St. Louis at this time. So I literally got in my car on Sunday, drove the 12 and a half hours. Because, last minute flights are ridiculously expensive. So I drove the 12 and a half hours, stayed at a little hotel room Sunday night, met him at 9 a.m. Monday morning, spent 2 hours with him. And my selling to him was, if you ever have to email me with a problem, then we have a problem. This is my cell phone number. So if I'm managing your property, I just want you to pick up the phone and call me or send me a text, and let's talk through it right then and there. And that was actually the most important thing for him, which is what got him to sign on. He didn't sign on for 5 more months, but he did eventually sign on. And
you had to follow up a couple of times.
I did. I had to follow up 3 times throughout the summer to be able to, to see how he's like, I just want to give my manager one more try. I had a conversation with him. It still didn't go good. He still didn't make any money. And in August, we signed contract to take it over.
Nice. Yeah. And I think we're kind of running into that a little bit too at the moment with our cold calls, where somebody may not be happy, but they're pretty booked already for the summer. So they kind of maybe don't want to take that risk of not being able to get rebooked at better bookings. They'd rather hold on to it. And our thinking is the same, come August when peak season's over down there, hopefully some people kind of come back around to us.
Hey,
But I love
Joe.
that you took that trip down. We did think we were going to close on a client a little while back. And we basically were saying, we can meet you at the property, on, I think it was right over the holidays. So it was like right before New Year's. Actually, it was your referral. And thank you for that. That we were like, oh, we can be down there, in 2 days or the next day. I think, those are some of the things you have to do, right, to be able to secure those deals.
Hey, Joe, a quick question. You mentioned underperforming. You said you targeted underperforming properties. What is your definition of underperforming? What metrics are you looking at, or KPIs, where you're saying, listen, that has to be better? It's unacceptable that homeowner is living with that kind of performance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going into AirDNA or Price Labs, and I'm looking, you can go in and get actual revenue on what these properties are doing. And, it used to be, AirDNA is a lot more robust now than what it was back then. Back then, I would have to, hover on each, purple circle to click on it to pull up that house and figure out. And I targeted, anywhere from, 3 to 5 properties, 10 properties. When I had my co-host coaching business, I had people targeting up to as many as 100 properties and turning those into contacts and going after them. I was pretty fortunate. I only had to cold call those first 2 clients. After that, I kind of really became that person of interest in my market. And every other co-host client since then has been referrals or people that have called me. So I have not had to go after anybody else. And I've turned down over 40 properties over the last couple of years.
Nice. Yeah, we hope to get there one day. That's definitely the ideal situation. So you cold call, got two, and then now everything's coming through referrals. So how many properties are you managing today?
A month ago, I was at 14, and now I'm back down to 10
Okay.
because the first 4 properties that we took on, the 3 that I just talked about, the 2 Branson cabins, my first ever co-host property, and one other, were the only 4 properties that we didn't like completely go and deck out and redesign.
Sure.
And they were great owners, but they, our kind of minimum is properties that are in that, 150K plus mark. And, they were not willing to reinvest. I gave them ideas. I gave them design plans. We, worked with them to say, hey, if we do this, we can get to this level. If we do this, we can get to that level. And they just weren't, they weren't in a position that they could reinvest in their properties. They were still making money because they bought them so long ago.
Sure.
And we just had to pumpkin plan and say, for us to go forward, we got to take a little step backwards. So we ended up passing off all those properties. So the 2 in Branson, I gave to Melissa, who's on my Savvy team, who owns and co-hosts in the Missouri market. It's her first
Nice.
2 Branson properties. She's fantastic. And then I had a guy in my training program, Trent, who was in my co-host mastermind, and he took over the 2 properties down in PCB for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sure they were ecstatic to get those. So what does your vision look like next 12, 24 months? Want to keep rescaling with better properties, or are you trying to stay at like a certain number, revenue number? What's your
Yeah,
goal?
we're in acquisition phase for our personal, a property.
Sure.
So we're looking to purchase 2 ourselves by the end of the year. My
Nice.
daughter's going to be going to ASU in the fall, so I think we're going to end up purchasing one in Tempe or
Nice.
Scottsdale, something along those lines, that we can, have a property that we can stay in when we go visit over the next 4 years, but also make some money on. And then we'll probably do another one in Panama City Beach, or if another opportunity comes up somewhere else, then maybe we'll go there too. But right now we're focused on scaling our own portfolio. We've kind of put a halt on our design and setups for the next 6 months so we can spend this time with our girls. Like, our daughter's going to be going away to college, so we have a couple trips. We're taking them to St. Thomas next month, and we have a senior trip, and of course graduation, and there's a lot of things happening, and we want to make sure we spend as much time with both of our daughters during this time, and kind of just slow down a little bit this summer.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Scott and I both follow you on social media. And it looks like you're on the road a lot, right? Whether it's I think recently in Montana for some of Bill's stuff, and then down in Florida, obviously. So it seems like you're a man on the move. One thing that just came to mind in terms of when you were doing like the underserved investor route that Scott and I are about to do, if people don't know, but in AirDNA now, you can export the list of property management companies in the area, and it actually gives you the link to their host page on Airbnb. So then you can quickly go through and find the ones that are really underperforming. So just a tip for anybody listening that wants to say quickly, like, how to go and find those properties that aren't performing very well. Cool. So you kind of talked about what you're thinking in terms of scale, markets. So you're going to buy in other markets. Do you think you would co-host in those markets as well, or are you just going to focus on co-hosting in Panama City Beach?
We might pick up one, just because it's good to have a team to have more than one property. I really don't want to scale a co-hosting business in multiple markets. I really like focusing on just the one. So I may just buy and that be it. We're probably going to add on 1 or 2 more co-host properties in PCB this year. I know we're adding on two 3-bedroom houses here next month. That we have one of our clients that has a son that bought a couple properties, and they really want us. They're designing it themselves. We're not doing the setup.
Okay.
We're just going to help them and co-host it this year and see how that goes on those properties. But they didn't really completely fit our mold, but it's close. And I also, as a realtor in Panama City Beach, one of the things that I've been able to do is create comps, right? So I don't have any other 3 bedrooms, so I'm kind of excited to manage these 2 3-bedrooms. I think I can push them to 120 to 125, which doesn't quite hit my 150 mark, but it's also going to help other investors that are looking in the market see that it can be done. Because a lot of these 3 bedrooms are hitting 80 to 90 or 100K, and I think there's potential to hit those better numbers, and it's going to challenge me to do that, and that's going to be the goal.
Nice. Yeah, that's definitely a big advantage of being deeply ingrained in a market, right? You at this point, I'm sure, can look at a property, look at the location, see what it has, and be like, all right, this is going to do probably within this range of income. So it's a nice skill to have. Is there anything, knowing what you know now, and as you were, building your co-hosting business, is there anything that you think you would do differently, or anything you're thinking you may change about your business going forward?
Yeah, I mean, so the biggest thing that we've been working on this off season is kind of going back and fixing some systems, some processes. Last year we got into summer months, and some of my bottlenecks were paying cleaners, because I had one cleaner getting paid through Zelle and one getting paid through Venmo and one getting paid through an invoice that they sent. And so we switched from the free Turno to paid Breezeway. And so we're implementing that as we speak, so we can start paying our cleaners right through that as soon as they complete. And instead of them texting me pictures, or sometimes they'd upload them to Turno, sometimes they'd text them. It's a process. They're going to have to upload it to Breezeway. We have to approve it for them to get paid, and so we're kind of revamping our system so we can potentially scale a few more properties, but we need to get that stuff on track first. So I wish I would have done a little bit more of that first, but at the same time, it's one of those things, like, if you sit back and you wait too long and you're trying to get too many systems in place and you don't just jump, you never get started. So I don't regret just jumping in and getting started, but now we're in a position that we gotta fix a few operational things.
For sure. Yeah, no, you got to have properties to be able to build your business. How is buy-in going with that and your cleaners? I mean, I know your properties are crushing it, so I'm sure they're very motivated to do what needs to be done to stay on. But how has that been, getting them to say, okay, I'm going to transition, and now I have to do this cleaning checklist a certain way and invoice a certain way, communicate probably a certain way? How's that been going?
They make a lot of money from us, so we haven't had any pushback on it. So I think it was easier to do it because of that. I think, a first person starting out to say, hey, this is what we need and this is what you're doing right away, you'd probably get a little pushback from some of the cleaners. And it's also finding the right cleaners. I mean, we fired multiple cleaners over the first couple of years before we found our team. And now that we have our team, we're really happy with them. They're happy with us. It's a great relationship.
Nice. Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I've had to have a little bit of journey trying to figure out what the right type of cleaning company is. So initially, in the Poconos, we had a couple that were our cleaners, and they hired a couple of people, and it was very small, but they did phenomenal job cleaning. But communication was kind of poor. Turnaround time was poor in terms of, like, if we got a same day booking or a request to book for the next day, would they be able to get there in time to clean it? So then we ended up switching to a larger company, and that meant, any booking we could take, because they could always get somebody there, but maybe the cleaning wasn't as good. So how are you managing that? Are you working with a company that could make sure they can be at every property, or do you have like several different cleaning companies and they're assigned to like one or two of your properties?
I have a couple different cleaning companies. I have one that has 6, one that has 4, and then I have a third one that's going to take on 2. When I did have 14, I had 4 different total cleaning companies. We're down to 2 cleaning companies now, but we're going to be bringing one back for these other 2 that we're going to take on. And they have other properties that they clean for. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we had some of the same thing. We started with that mom and pop in the very beginning that did a good job, and they were fairly timely, but they tried to scale, and it didn't work. They didn't have the management skills to scale correctly. And then we tried a big company, and we had to fire her within 30 days. It was not a good experience. But, we own our own linens, and we showed up to the property. We don't tell our cleaners when we're coming, and we showed up to the property, and we had blue sheets and blue pillowcases on in our house, and our whole linen closet was empty. And we actually had to call her, and she said, "Oh, we don't know where your linens are." And I had to threaten her. I had to tell her, well, it's a felony over $750 worth of theft in the state of Florida. You have 24 hours to return all of my linens. And she bought me all new sheets, towels,
crazy,
everything, and delivered them the next day, because I wasn't kidding. I was livid. So, now that we have our teams in place, I'll say they're bigger, but not. Like, they're a small company in the off season. They bring in more people in the summer. Yeah. Obviously, we're going to see we see a few issues in the summer months, especially like this month, peak season of spring break. But overall, they do a phenomenal job.
Yeah. And I would say almost with any cleaning company, you're going to get a couple bumps in the road anyway in peak season, right? It's going to happen because everyone's so busy. But there is that challenge of seasonal workers who know they're really only there for 8 weeks, right? And they can be a little bit of a challenge to make sure they're staying at the level that's needed to perform with the property. But I think that's just an ongoing issue. Is there anything that you're doing to ensure, like, do you have it set up where somebody checks out? And I'm sure in peak season it is the case because you're probably a lot of back-to-backs, but on non-peak or non-super busy times that you're the priority where you always have a cleaner there right after checkout?
Oh, yeah. Every property we We can do a same day turn on all 10 properties today if we had to. Actually, I think we have 7 same day turns today.
Yeah. And was that just a commitment that you were able to get from them? Or did you say, okay, I'll pay you a little bit more to be a priority? Or they just know your properties perform, so we're willing to be there?
They know, and because we do have top tier properties, we do get the preferential treatment. So,
Sure.
you know, I can call any of my cleaners. If there's an issue, I can call my cleaner right now and they will stop wherever they are at and go to my property because we've built that relationship, and we give them incentives and we give them bonuses. We've sent them to dinner. Actually, my cleaner on 4 of the properties, we were actually open at my own house on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day this year for 2 nights. And I let them stay there for free for 2 nights and just have a
Nice.
little, have a little
That's
holiday
great.
at the beach because they live about 45, 50 minutes away. So do everything we can to take care of them, and they return the favor.
That's awesome. Nice. So you talked about tech a little bit. You talked about switching from Turno to Breezeway. Is there another tool outside of MarketMySTR that you think you really couldn't live without as a co-host, like something that's super integral to your company?
The most important thing and the best thing that I've done in my business is I hired a revenue manager this past year.
Yep.
And it has been life-changing because, revenue management, as you know, has become such a robust thing, and you can't just wing it anymore to
Yep.
be successful. And that's kind of what I was doing last year. I was so busy in real estate, so busy with the property management company that I wasn't getting in and looking at my competition anymore. I wasn't, getting all the rule sets where they needed to be. And, I managed it, and we still did really, really well. But man, we're up 30% in some of my properties this year, in the first quarter. And I attribute that to hiring a revenue manager that is looking at it daily. And I use pricing by mirror with Emil Sakal. There are a lot of great revenue managers out there, Jay Cohen, a few others. But so I can't say, that one is better than the rest, but I've been really, really happy.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm happy to hear that. I've been through Jay Cohen's class and in his mastermind for revenue management because the plan was we were going to do it in-house, right? Like I was going to get really good at it. We trained people to do it. And about a couple months ago, I kind of came to the realization that you probably came to as well, that like I need to be able to focus on operations, focus on the other things. Like I know I'm not eventually going to have the time to invest into revenue management because you have to have those constant touch points that we also plan to bring on a revenue manager, and we're going to do it from day one. I think it's the right move to make sure you're maximizing, what you can on those properties. So, all right. So I guess that's handing off tech, right? Because they're using Price Labs or using, Wheelhouse or something along those lines. Anything
Yep.
else you're currently using that's a super
We're
priority?
kind of in the early stages of bringing on HostBuddy AI to help
Nice.
with some of the messaging and guest messaging and stuff like that. We're also kind of figuring out this PMS. We've been with OwnerRez Hospitable for the longest time, but now with the new VRBO issues, you can't do the VRBO messaging through Hospitable and have OwnerRez. So we've slid everything over to OwnerRez now. So we're, for the first time ever, API integrating into our Verbo properties, which
Okay.
means we're now merchant of record and
Yep.
the whole works. But I actually just had Pierre Camille from Hospitable on my podcast yesterday.
Nice.
His episode will be coming out in a couple weeks. And man, they have so many things coming soon. They have a new API integration with Verbo.
Yeah.
It's very impressive, and I'm debating on making the switch after summer. I'm not going to do it before peak season. I
Sure.
already got rental agreements and security deposits and everything set up for this summer. So it is what it is. I'm where I am for the summer, but depending on how this summer goes with OwnerRez, I may end up making that switch this fall.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I was initially on Hospitable in 2021 and had the issue where they weren't API connected to VRBO and it was constantly dropping and it just got really frustrating. They've made so many changes. I did a demo with them recently as well, and I think the API connection is coming maybe any day for VRBO. I might be switching back as well soon.
His API connection is live. They're just in the testing stages. I think they have about 20 properties in right now.
Right.
But he told me, he said, give me 30 to 45 days. He's like, and I think we'll be
Sure,
there.
well,
So doing it at the end of July, August is when I would probably make that switch.
yeah.
And so we'll consider it at that time. We'll see.
Yeah.
I still like OwnerRez. There's a lot of things that OwnerRez does for me that I really, really like. So I need to see how they handled security deposits and rental agreements and all that stuff on the
Uh-huh.
hospitable side, because that's something that we do. And
Yeah.
so got to look at the
I
whole
think
picture,
it's
not just one aspect.
I think it's pretty similar to how OwnerRez and like HostAway and everyone else does it as well. But they also do other things too in their subscriptions. And as you do scale, trying to be a little cost conscious can turn into a thing. I think they include like your door locks and a couple of thermostats and a few other things in that subscription cost, where everybody else, it's an add-on. It's an extra $10, it's an extra 15
Yep.
bucks per device. And then all of a sudden you're paying $80, through your PMS, and it gets a little crazy. So I think they're doing some of the right things over there. So you had mentioned your linens. I want to talk about like, how do you differentiate and like ensure a good guest experience across your 10 properties? So do you have like all of the same linens? So you make sure that like if somebody stays at one property, they're going to have the same sleeping experience at another. Like, tell us about how like you're differentiating yourself maybe a little bit from the competition in PCB.
I mean, my personal opinion is what quality sheets you have on the property don't matter a darn thing. That's my
Sure.
personal opinion. I've never ever had a client complain that we have Amazon sheets in our
Yeah.
properties. And we have luxury properties that do $250,000 a year.
Sure.
They'll complain about something being dirty. They'll complain about something not having the right kitchen utensils. They're not
Right.
complaining about sheets. And sheets are one of those things that we dispose of a lot of them. They get ruined. So we don't go out and buy those 4,000 thread count, high dollar sheets. We
Mm-hmm.
use quilts at the beach. We don't use duvets
Okay.
because they're just too heavy at the beach for
Mm.
us. So we use quilts. We have two sets for every single bed, so they can be cleaned and washed.
Yep.
And they're easy. They can go in a regular washing machine. So that's kind of what we do. And then where we really set ourselves apart is our whole bed setup, right? We have anywhere from 5 to 7 decorative pillows. We have that throw
Mhm.
blanket. The biggest issue that I see, and it's a pet peeve of mine, is when I see someone list a property and they have 2 usable pillows on a bed.
Yeah.
They have this
Right.
big king bed and each person has a pillow. Well, a lot of people sleep with 2 pillows. Like,
Yeah.
they want to be propped up a little bit. So we make sure that we have 2 usable pillows for every single bed except for twins. Twins are the only beds that we have 1 pillow, because
Sure.
typically it's just going to be a teenager or a kid that doesn't really care. But for all of our fulls, queens, kings, we're using 4 usable pillows in every bed.
Nice. Anything else that you try and standardize, like bath products, shampoo, body wash, those kinds of things, or how do you kind of handle that?
There's a lot of people that like to use the soap dispensers and the body wash dispensers. We like the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Our cleaners supply them. And my theory behind this is, and you can talk to people on how often they actually have to refill what's in those bathrooms. It's very, very, not very often, because most women in today's market have a product
Yeah.
that they're going to use, and they're
Right.
not going to use any other product on their body, on their hair, or anything like that.
Right.
And us guys, we don't care, right? Like, the little 2-ounce thing that's on the bath, or if it's in the bathtub, I don't care. I'm going to use
Yeah.
whatever's there, right? And
100%.
that's the majority. So I think some people put too much into that. Don't get me wrong. I like the stuff that you put in there and you can refill it and the whole works. I
Mhm.
just don't think there's a huge difference between the two. Now, the things that we do, like we have makeup towels,
Sure.
washcloths, and we have makeup wipes, and we have hair dryers in every bathroom.
Mhm.
And, we make sure that we're,
You're
supplying
stocked.
all those little things. We don't leave 3 things of dishwashing detergent and laundry detergent. We leave it full. If they need to do
Mhm.
5 loads a day, they can do 5 loads a day. We're
Right.
not skimping on that stuff. We leave a big roll of trash bags under the sink. If they need to use 10, we got 10 trash bags. So we're not skimping on that kind of stuff. But for the body washes and the shampoos and stuff like that, I just don't see a huge difference in the market on which way you go.
Right. I would say too, having the smaller bottles, and I agree with you. I think it's the guys that are using it, like they're going to use the amount that's available to them, most likely, right? So if you have this
Yep.
dispenser, it's probably getting used more so than the little bottles. For me, I was staying away from little bottles because I wanted to be a little more eco-friendly. The company in Haven was on a podcast that I was listening to about a year ago, and they had explained why they think the smaller bottles are actually more eco-friendly than the bigger jugs and the refillable stuff. So I think I've switched my thinking, and probably in Florida we will do the smaller bottles, similar to what you're probably doing at your properties. So I think with that, I'll hand it over to Scott. He'll ask you some stuff about kind of the market, and maybe some advice that you have for people that are either, short-term rental owners or, people that are looking to get into the co-host space.
So, Joe, I have a transitional question based on what Jeremy said. I was joking on, I think, a piece of content that I created that feels like some managers in short-term rentals treat toilet paper like it's a rare and precious commodity. It's like a half a roll for the entire family for the week. Is that something that you also make available in spades? Like whatever they need is there for them, and same with paper towels.
Yeah, four rolls per bathroom, which we feel is enough. Some people like to leave an extra case, and we've done that in situations. But if you're leaving 4 rolls per bathroom, there's not many places that are going through more than 4 rolls for a bathroom in a week. So that's kind of what we leave. It's what our cleaners, we pay a little extra to our cleaners because they supply it. They do leave 2 rolls, I think, of paper towels. So that's not something we go overboard on. But I do have an interesting message that I send out, and it's specifically for a lot of the younger crowd. But I do have a message that I send out that says, hey, just a reminder, bath towels are for the bathroom. If you have a spill, please use paper towels, because one of our biggest issues early on was our linens getting ruined because someone would spill beer and they'd go grab a bathroom towel and clean up their beer. And then, that towel may or may not be able to get washed. And that's where we found a lot of ruined linens. So that's actually in one of my messages that I send out to please use paper towels and not a bath towel.
Are you using like a damage waiver fee or anything to cover replacing linens or towels or just damages?
I do a $500 security deposit on every reservation, and that typically covers everything. I've debated on going to the damage waiver. I've even considered going to just self doing it, where you just charge the $50 per reservation and keep the money, and then use that money to make those purchases. So we're looking at it, but so far we've been using the $500 security deposit, and it's been fine. I've had 2 guests in 3 years that canceled their reservation because they didn't want that security deposit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's probably not a guest you want anyway.
Nope.
So about 5 more minutes left, Joe. Couple things. Let's talk specifically about what makes the Bay Area, the West PCB and PCB market so special. Let's first start with, I know you've got a portfolio of properties. Who's the typical guest in your properties these days?
2 families sharing. Right. So, I mean, I think the multi-family vacations are becoming more and more common. So this is where having more than 1 king bed is so crucial. I think that one of the biggest mistakes I see investors make is they'll have a king bed, a queen bed, and some bunks, and you just eliminated 50% of the population from booking your place because you don't have 2 king beds, because there are bigger people out there that will only stay in king beds. And so even if your bedroom is tight and you don't have a ton of space on each side, you're still going to make $10,000 more a year just by having that second king bed. But we're seeing a lot of multifamily vacations. It's interesting though, like I have properties that sleep 14, 15, 16, some 18, and our average is still around 10, 12. It's still that 2 families on average. So I think it's important to, occasionally we get those 14, 15, 16, guests, but we get a lot of guests in that 8 to 12 range where it's just 2 families sharing, or maybe 3 families sharing. 3 couples.
So that brings up a MarketMYSTR question. When you talk about dual families renting properties, you obviously have one booker, and then you have this second family who's a potential rebook opportunity. How are you leveraging? What are you doing? I know one of the things that MarketMYSTR has been able to help our subscribers with is maximizing the potential of a list that they create. So what are you doing when it comes to getting the information for that second family and all that stuff? Talk about that a second.
Yeah, we originally used StayFi, which was great, but since MarketMYSTR came out with the QR code, we've implemented that in about half of our properties, and we're going to test that this summer. We're going to test that between how many emails are we getting on the QR codes and how many are we getting on the properties that have StayFi, to decide which direction we truly want to go to past this peak season. So we're kind of in a little bit of a testing phase. I love the QR code. I love that there's no extra cost. The CRM goes right into MarketMYSTR. So we're excited about that. And I think that remarketing to the more than just the booker is really important, because you get a lot of people that those multi-families book and they want to come back and maybe they don't vacation together the next year.
What other trends, maybe specifically for someone who's considering investing in a short-term rental down in the area that you're at, what trends do you see short-term rental owners having to deal with here in the next couple of years?
The biggest thing is you got to level up. You can't be average anymore. I hate the word saturation, but the market is saturated with average listings.
Man.
And that's every market in the nation is saturated with average. And it's the old 80-20 model. In every single business, every single thing that you ever do, there's always the 80-20. 20% of the realtors do 80% of the business. 20% of the short-term rentals do 80% of the business. 20% of it doesn't matter what it is. And if you want to be successful in short-term rentals, you got to be in that top 20%. And, that means you have to invest in your property. You can't just think you're going to buy turnkey or leave it as is, and I'll give a quick example. I have two properties side by side. I now co-host both of them and we've redesigned both of them. But
Nice.
in the beginning, we only had one and the one next door, and it's a duplex. And each side is a 5-bedroom, 5.5 bath, in-ground pool, hot tub, golf front, beautiful properties, right? And 3 stories, amazing views, right across the street from the beach, unobstructed. Property A is the one that we took over, and in May of 24, and my wife and I designed it. We put about a 30 to 40K design, new furnishings, wallpaper, murals, the whole works. Property B right next door is identical. It's a duplex, same floor plan. They kept the old manager, same furniture, the whole works. They did $103,000. And we did $223,000 in that same time period.
Crazy.
On the same property with the same views and the same amenities, right? So if that doesn't tell you that you have to invest in your property, I don't know what is, because that is like prime example of why you need to invest.
I would say it's investing in your property, but it's also having the right person manage, because I guarantee that property management company still wouldn't have gotten there. If they had switched properties with you, you still would have done better on the other property than
100% agree. 100% agree. It is the second part of it is who's managing it, whether you're self-managing, hiring a good property manager that understands what they're doing. Because 2 doors down, there was another one similar because there's 4 of them together, and they didn't have as good of a design as us, but they had a better property manager and they did like 140, right? Yeah. So they did do better. None of them did the 223 that we were doing. And now we actually co-host 3. We've redesigned and co-host 3 in a row, and we're expecting 250 in each one.
That's awesome. Do you have it as a combined listing? Rent all
3 different owners, so I don't have a combined listing, but I do have it in the listing that we could sleep 48 people all next to each other.
Crazy.
All right, Joe, I'm going to ask you 2 special questions. You and I know we live this, believe it, but what makes vacationing down in the PA and PCB area so special?
I mean, it's still the most beautiful beaches in the world, in my opinion. Yes, there's other places and islands and places that you can go to, but in the United States, I don't think there's any beaches that are better. Crystal clear blue water, white sand beaches, and, you go to places like, Bradenton example or Cocoa Beach, and you're half a mile from the beach. You're a mile from the beach. In these markets, you're 1 to 2 blocks, to be, or you're beachfront. You can be beachfront, but you could be 1 to 3 blocks away, and you're still a quick 3-minute walk, 4-minute walk to get to the beach. And you don't get that in a lot of markets. Most of these markets, you got to drive to the beach. And this is one of the few markets that you can just, wake up, walk out of your front door and be on the beach in a couple minutes.
I know you're really proud and happy to be part of the Savvy real estate team, and your market is specifically down in PCB. What makes buying a vacation property down in that area so special?
It is a regional drivable destination, for one. If you think about if we were to go into a recession or a financial downturn, we're protected, right? People are still going to go on vacation. They may only go for 3 days, but they're not going to fly anywhere. They're going to drive somewhere. So we have that. We have so many areas close to us. 75% of our people drive, but there's so many amenities. It's not just the beach. In Panama City Beach, we have a Dolly Parton dinner theater. We have a Top Golf. We have a huge outlet mall. We have a Wonderworks, a water park, go-karts, putt-putt. And you have a lot of these things are down in Destin and 30A as well. I mean, there's just so many activities for a family to do that even on a rainy day, you can have a fun-filled, jam-packed day.
So what did we miss? This is a final question, is kind of a catch-all. When it comes to people vacation, when it comes to people potentially wanting to co-host, or people who need help and want to elevate their property in one of those 4 pillars, when I ask this general question, what did we miss, or what would you like to leave people with? What comes to mind for you?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that I have seen in success is surrounding myself around the right people. And whether it be masterminds, whether it be Facebook groups, whether it be, people like you guys. When you get in the room with the right people, everything gets better. So if you own a property, find those people, find your tribe, find your people that you can network with, that you can work together with, because that is going to escalate your business. I joined Bill Face Accelerator Program all the way back in 2022, and it grew my business 30-fold, getting that little bit of money to join that accelerator program at that time. And I didn't continue on as mastermind after that or anything. I started my own mastermind for free for a few years because I wasn't really in a position to spend that kind of money. But now I'm in his full mastermind. I've been in the short-term secrets mastermind. I've been in Julie George's mastermind. So there are so many great people out there. And what I love about this business more than anything is everybody is willing to help. There is not many people out there that are going to be like, I don't want to help them because that's going to take away business from me. We are all in that abundance mindset of let's all do better and let's all make more money, because all the people that are in this are still a small percentage of what's in the short-term rental industry. So if we all continue to help each other grow and learn and become better, we're just going to continue to be in that top 10, top 20%.
Brilliant, man. Well, it's always good hanging with you. How do people get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm very active on Facebook groups, so you can just find me, Joe Rohne, send me a friend request or a DM. If you want to schedule a call with me to chat about the Emerald Coast, I'm happy to do that. Savvy.realty/Joe. You can schedule it on my calendar, but yeah, I'm an open book, very active. I have my short-term rental playmaker podcast that we talk about actionable items and things that you can do to improve your property.
Jeremy, what'd I miss? Anything?
No, I think we hit on it. We'll have to have you back, somewhat in the near future and talk a little bit more about Panama City and, where you're at.
I appreciate you guys having me on.
Joe, love you. Appreciate you. Thank you for everything. And we'll talk soon. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in the next episode.
Appreciate it.